Welcome to Extra Takes, hosted by Northland Church Senior Pastor Dr. Joshua Laxton. Join us each week as Pastor Josh reveals the rest of the story behind his sermons. We'll discuss how those who follow Christ can live out a biblical vision for the church in our world today.
Well, hello, Northland family and friends. Welcome to another episode of Extra Takes. I'm finally back. It's been actually several weeks now. Matt did the thing last week. I say the thing, Extra Takes, even though he did it without me in the new studio. Like, I don't understand that, but it's not about me. But it was great for him to be able to be there with Tom, and I'm grateful for Pastor John and Tom filling in over the last couple of weeks, but it was great to be back.
Yeah, great to be back. And we are on Zoom today, but we'll be back in the studio soon enough, and we'll get to break in these new digs.
Yeah, well, I needed a break after you and Gus wore me out in Africa, and then I got back, and I was tired, and then I went to get my dad, who lives in Pensacola, to bring him back because we were going to be going to the beach, and that's where we are. We are in New Smyrna right now.
Nice.
And I blurred out my background so that you don't see the bed, the mess bed. So
awesome. Well, I know how passionate you are about these messages, so we appreciate you taking the time, even while you're on vacation, to do this. But we're going to have a good conversation digging into emotions through the lens of the gospel. So let's just dig in. This was July 19th and 20th, 2025, and this is a 2-week series called Emotions Through the Lens of the Gospel. Obviously, we have a movie that really helps us launch into that conversation, but it was great the way you described it. It's really through the lens of the gospel. So the main point, which was interesting, you kind of dug into it later into the message, not at the very beginning, but you said the main point is emotions exist to express God's image and move you in God's direction. You also said you can act according to his character. So let me give you the overview, and then we'll kind of jump right in. As you began, you gave us a main idea. You said how we deal with our emotions can either enhance or erode our overall personal and interpersonal health. I think that is such an obvious statement if any of us are just self-reflecting. So as you said that, I was like, yeah, that, if we have all felt our interpersonal health erode, and if we're honest with ourselves, we can recognize a lot of times it's through our emotions.
Well, it's a simple thought. I felt like I needed to at least start with that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we wake up every day going, am I emotionally healthy so that I can be healthy? And am I emotionally healthy with other people so that I can be, so that we can have healthy relationships? But when you look at it, and this is what we'll look at even kind of next week with anxiety, worry, embarrassment, shame, and all of that, is that if you live within those emotions, and then particularly like if this particular week, if you live in this state of fear and sadness that is unhealthy, or anger that is unhealthy. Just think about anger. And again, I had to give an overview, but if you let anger take the kind of the anchor of your soul, and you let it carry its course out, you're going to move from anger to bitterness to resentment to hatred to harboring unforgiveness. And so, we know what that we know what happens when that So those are things that, again, we know those, but I don't know if we live with a true awareness of those every day to in some sense take stock of where we are emotionally.
Yeah, well said. And that's how something can feel so true when you say it, even if we didn't realize we felt that way.
Yeah.
So we started there. You looked at the control room in Inside Out 1. Really, this week was focused on Inside Out 1. Inside Out 2 will be next week. And you asked us this question, what is missing from the control room? And that's where you brought into the faith framework this framework that we've looked at so often, and you're able to use that to say, hey, Disney and Pixar, they're depicting a faith framework, and they're depicting something in the middle. We have to recognize they're not depicting Jesus in the middle, but it's something that we can learn from and use and recognize, hey, as we do put Jesus in the middle of the faith framework, the ways that we've been talking about that with politics and business and all of our life, with media and movies, that obviously affects our emotions. So it was great to have another common framework, but look at it through this lens.
Yeah.
Like you say, you're a one-trick pony. I think you said that, not me.
That's me.
So then we went on to these common Christian misunderstandings. I think you had a lot of fun with that one, the happy clappy Christian.
Yeah.
You know what
Have you seen those? Have you seen the Happy Clappy Christian?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I think I've seen all of
They're
them.
always smiling.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I don't want. I don't have anybody in mind. I mean, I don't think my mom is like a happy clappy Christian. She just showed it in the morning, when I was
Sure.
growing up, and I'm like, please stop. But I think sometimes that those, and again, in my past, I mean, I've definitely come across the happy clappy Christians, but sometimes they come across as very fake. It's like they're putting on
Sure.
a show, and I'm like, you're not always like this.
Hmm.
Because I
Yeah,
want
it's
to say, like, God's not always like this.
yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I think authenticity is becoming more and more important in our culture. So all the more for us to, if we do find ourselves leaning towards that happy clappy Christian, that this message, and I think next week will as well, gives us the liberty to say, well, gives us the reason, the excuse to not always be happy. We recognize, hey, I can be raw and real with my emotions, and I can still follow Jesus.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, and I think too that they're, the happy clappy Christian, I think sometimes they confuse joy and happiness, and that you
Sure.
always have to exhibit something on your face, or like
Sure.
you're happy or there's joy,
Sure.
and they quote things like, Nehemiah says the joy of the Lord is your strength. Okay, I get that. I
Mm.
can exhibit joy, and this is what I was really trying to get at the end. I can still have joy, and joy can be the predominant emotion, but that doesn't mean that I cannot, that I don't have the liberty to be frustrated or angry. It doesn't mean I don't have
Mm.
the liberty to be disgusted. I don't have the
Yeah.
liberty
Yeah.
to be, so this
Yeah.
is part of where, and I think that's why, over the course of even my ministry, people have always said you are very authentic. You're like, what you see is what like you're not ashamed of telling us that how you're feeling, or like, I'm not like, I want people to know that as a Christian, I don't want to vomit on everybody, but I want
Sure.
people to know that, hey, yeah, like, it's okay to
Mm.
voice how you are feeling. And the church ought to be the safest place on planet Earth for
Yeah.
you to be emotional, to just be honest and authentic. But that's why we need to process it, because if you're staying in one emotion indefinitely and you're
Sure.
spiraling in it, you
Mm.
might want to do a deeper dive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, the happy clappy Christian, I think they miss the idea that there is a difference between joy and happiness, and they think
Yeah.
you always ought to be smiling. They think you
Yeah.
all ought to always be happy, and man, you're alive, you're breathing, you ought to be. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's where these other misunderstandings, the military Christian, macho Christian, and the Zen Christian, seem to take one of these ideas of feeling too many emotions or not enough emotions to the extreme,
yeah.
right?
Well, and and I didn't have time to dive into it, but when you look at the military Christian and you look at the macho Christian,
Mm.
it really is depicted in a kind of generation. So when you look at basically our parents and our grandparents' generation,
Mm.
you didn't express much emotion. I
Mm.
remember my granddad, I never saw him cry.
Mm,
Very seldom did he, I mean, occasionally he would chuckle, but he
mm,
was very stoic. And I
mm,
think that generation, again, you hate to lump a generation and everybody who's that age, like, hey, you're kind of this military Christian, but I think again in the church, you just didn't show any emotion.
mm,
And you have to also understand, like from a like even a church denominational perspective,
mm,
people like what's fascinating is the more expressive denomination, which is Pentecostalism,
mhm,
or you could say charismatics. That denomination really grew from the mid 1900s to, even till today. I mean, it's spreading like wildfire, but that was
mm.
more of an emotionally expressive denomination. But if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
look at in the 1800s, early 1900s, the two
Mm,
biggest
mm,
denominations were Baptist and Methodist, and then you also had like the Presbyterians, the Lutherans. But if you've ever been to one of their worship service, they're very rigid.
reserved. Yeah,
There's
yeah,
there's not they're very reserved, right? So
yeah.
they're not. So in some sense, that was kind of the generation um,
Mm,
that that even American culture had, and then you look at in the church culture, very much
yeah,
rigid and
yeah.
non-expressive. So it's kind of like so. And then I do remember growing up kind of culturally, where boys don't cry. Why are you crying?
Right.
And so
Yeah,
it's supposed to be tough.
yeah.
And I actually remember too, and this was where I needed to grow, but I remember years ago, um, just not having a really good theology around emotions and particularly sadness and grief.
Mm,
And even lament, and I would tell, and I'm ashamed of this, but when my wife lost her sister, I'm like, why are you like you ought to be, you ought not grieve. The
mm,
Bible says grieve, we grieve with as those with hope, and but it's kind of like
mm,
I was kind of saying don't grieve
mm,
because we know where Celeste went. But no, you need to grieve. You need to lament.
mm.
You need to be sadness. You
Yeah,
need to have sadness.
yeah, yeah,
So I really have grown significantly over the last 15 years,
yeah,
even with embracing these emotions that again that are definitely biblical. You
yeah,
see you see David in the Psalms. I mean, he's lamenting,
yeah.
he's sad. But while I'm thinking about it, but you do have in Psalms 137, you have the exiles there by the rivers of Babylon, and God's actually telling them to move on. So again,
Mm,
there's a time for sadness, there's a time
mm,
for lamenting, there's a time for grieving, but there is also a time for kind of moving on. And so,
yeah,
and again, all this was an introduction to emotions, just to kind of give us
yeah,
again a framework of how to think about it without diving deep into them.
yeah. Well, in this week, you very much, even what you just mentioned, you very much took us on a journey of both how you have changed and matured in your emotions, but then also the reality of like where you are now with certain emotions. So I think that was really real, raw, and honest, and I appreciate you modeling that for us.
Yeah.
Um, and the fourth Christian misunderstanding, I think we probably see it more now, the Zen Christian. Christians should never get angry. I I feel like I experienced that from the world. I feel like that's kind of the view that the world has of Christians often is that we shouldn't get angry, and if we're showing any sort of strong emotion or righteous indignation, they'll call us out on it. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic to um, just to reflect on where we are in the church culture, where the pendulum has swung, but also where we are in our culture in terms of how they view us. And I think it's just helpful to know that and to recognize that.
Yeah. Well, and the Zen Christian is actually the one that that actually infuriates me the most.
I could see that.
Um, because I've seen it in like I've just seen it in the church world. Because as a pastor, you do get frustrated, and I get agitated, I get irritated, and there are a lot of reasons why I get agitated and irritated.
Mm,
Again, I have to process those, but I mean, but one of the biggest ones is like, when people's like, well, you shouldn't be frustrated that like that sin. And I'm like, whoa, hang on, time out.
mm,
Just because I'm frustrated,
mm.
just because I'm irritated, just because like I'm angry
Yeah.
does not mean that I'm sinning. And and I've just seen that there is just such an unhealthy and an unbiblical view of anger
Mm,
and frustration. And
yeah.
then sometimes I want to tell, and these are not even coming, I mean, a lot of times this is coming from leaders in
Mm,
the church, which I'm like, you ought to know better. You are, if you're a leader and you're in some sense leading the church, I think you ought to know the Bible just a little bit better. And so what I want to say is that if to those is like, if you really do feel like I'm frustrated or irritated or angry, how about you ask questions of why?
mm,
Because this is part of where when I look at even Jesus, and I didn't even put this one in the scope of anger because I figure we would, we kind of talk about it, but it's him driving out the money changers.
yeah.
I think there was a host of emotions there. I
Yeah.
think there
Yeah.
was lament. I think there was disgust. I think there was, I
Mm,
think it was all of the above. But
mm,
obviously, Jesus did not sin. And I
mm.
don't think he was very docile, and I don't think he was very zen in
Yeah.
flipping tables. I mean, like I got my iPad here. Let's just say this is a table. I don't think Jesus went,
No. No.
and so I mean, I'm like, he's expressive, and I think
Right.
Middle
Mm.
Eastern culture is tend to be more expressive than us, but.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where I want to, I just want to, and again, I'm not giving us a license to be angry and sinful in our anger,
Yeah.
but I do believe that the Bible, and this is where I wanted to, kind of share even how God exhibits those emotions. Like my irritation and my frustration,
Mm,
a lot of times in the church has not necessarily anything to do with me per se. It's just how we've either made a mockery of the
mm,
church, how we play church, and how we allow human tradition and human, in some sense, ingenuity to actually prohibit in the advancement of God's mission. And
mm.
that's what makes me angry. And
Yeah.
and so and that goes back to Jesus's anger is that you
Yeah.
get a mockery of the
Yeah.
Father's house.
Yeah.
And I've got to do something, and I'm going to show you this isn't right, you know. And yeah, so those are yeah. That one is really like as you can tell. I mean, I really get agitated at the Zen Christian. Well, we just need to calm down, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Obviously it's different when you experience it firsthand, and that really leads into that section of God and emotions, because as you were talking about, as you're processing, pushing back against these stereotypes, you're going to the biblical precedent,
Yeah,
right? So with joy and sadness and anger and disgust, there was an example of God demonstrating those emotions.
yeah.
Now, interestingly, God fears nothing. There's nothing bigger than God, so he fears nothing. He never feels threatened. Um, did you have that concept going in that he expresses all of these except for fear? Or is that something that came out, or how did that come
Well,
about?
I mean, I knew that he did, and so, and that's where, like, gosh, there were so many scripture verses,
Mm,
and just to even let the cat out of the bag, though, for next week, and this is what, this is what's very fascinating. So obviously, he doesn't embody fear. Now, again, I wanted to show how we should embody fear because fear is multifaceted in
yeah,
terms of defining it. But then next week, and that's what I loved about Inside Out 2, is that it introduces more complex emotions as Riley gets older,
yeah,
and God exhibits none of those complex emotions.
anxiety.
None.
Mm,
Anxiety, woo, or apathy. He doesn't
mm,
exhibit embarrassment. And there's the
yeah,
fourth one. He doesn't, and so
interesting.
that's where I can't wait to drill down on those.
Huh.
And that's why I wanted to do the little circle image, to show you that God does embody these, that there's a core emotion, and then
Yeah.
there are these secondary core emotions
Yeah.
that even God has, but they were not, they didn't come into the
Mm.
lens, they didn't come into the framework until after sin happened. And so I wanted to really show that. Now I didn't know I was going to do that, but I'm always like, whenever I'm processing, I'm like, I'm asking, what's the best way to teach this? And if I can
Mm.
teach it in an image, that's even better. And
Why is that?
well, because we're visual people.
Mm.
A lot of people, there are some that are audio, and then there are some that are visual. And so
Mm.
when you combine audio and visual, then it's just, it tends to stay with people and
Mm.
stick even more. And so when I was looking at this, I'm like, okay, man, how do I put it in? Because I thought about, well, let me put it in a graduated. I'm like, no, because it's not graduated. And so
Mm.
that's where I thought about the consent, basically the circles being enlarged. And so,
Mm. Yeah. Well, and I even think about the faith framework. There's a lot that you unpack with the faith framework every time you put it up. So us just seeing that faith framework, anybody that's seen it 5, 10 times, there's a there's a source of knowledge, there's a foundation of knowledge that we come into it with immediately without you having to say anything, right? And then as you are reminding us of what all the categories are, I could see how visually it could just kind of like quickly get us back to what you had taught on before. So
yeah.
yeah, that's fascinating. I recognize that you teach on frameworks a lot, and these frameworks are visual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just a way to help you understand,
Mm.
something like putting up that whole self framework,
Yeah.
IQ,
Yeah.
personality, EQ, and spiritual disciplines. Like,
Yeah.
if you really want to look at it, how do you view even yourself and becoming whole? What you need to look at those four quadrants
Mm.
because that's basically all of the elements that go into your humanity. Now, when we look at Genesis 1:28, we
Mm.
know that we are to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion. Those are our activities that we do
Mm.
that are the embodiment of us being human after the image and likeness of Jesus, or
Mm.
likeness of Jesus. But when you look at your whole self, then like you look at the makeup of what it means to be human. Well, you got your intellect because that is completely different than any other creature that God has created.
Yeah.
Sure, there are animals that have some kind of intelligence, but not the intelligence and the intellect that human beings have.
Yeah.
Okay, then you got a personality, like how, like just who you are as a person. Like how do you receive these? How do you and so
Mm.
are you more dominant? Are you more cautious? That's why I love personality assessments because all they do is try to help you. Again, they're not inerrant, they're not the word of God, but they help you understand more of
Yeah.
your personhood and your personality of how you just deal with situations and people and
Mm. Mm.
so forth. And so again, but that's part of your personhood. I mean, now you could say some people, well, my dog has a personality. Not the way you have a personality. Monkeys don't have,
Sure.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
the chimpanzee world isn't going, man, you're a sanguine, mom. Like I can't believe, like stupid, like. But humans are completely different. Why? Because we have been fashioned in the image of God.
Yeah.
Emotions and then spiritual disciplines like
Yeah.
now, before the fall, they didn't necessarily have to have spiritual disciplines. I mean, the one spiritual discipline was obedience to
Mm.
don't eat the tree, and
Yeah.
and then their emotions were, I mean, again, it should have been fear and joy, and that's the reason why I wanted to show that. Like, if they would have, I mean, this is the thing, they thought. Here's the thing, they thought, Eve then Adam, they thought by eating the fruit they would have more joy. But by eating the fruit from the tree, the forbidden tree, they actually disrespected and disobeyed and therefore did not fear God. You see,
Mm.
they lost that emotion of fear, the
Mm.
awe, and the reverence that they should have had for God so that they would have been able to maintain their fear or
Mm.
maintain their joy. But what they did is they thought that fruit would give them more joy that God was holding out on them.
Mm.
And so, anywho, like, I mean, that's your whole self, you know.
Yeah.
And if you can understand your whole self and bring all of those under the lordship of Christ, you'll actually find yourself functioning better in life.
Yeah, and it reminds me of this big word we talk about, flourishing, and it seems like such an impossible thing to grasp, and we know fully we won't be able to grasp it here. But what this does, the IQ, EQ, personality, and spiritual disciplines, gives us a bit of an insight of becoming whole ourselves. How do we move in that direction
Yeah.
of flourishing? So under the spiritual disciplines, you said something about prayer, and I know you can't fully get into it now, but you said there's a right way to pray and a wrong way to pray. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, Jesus obviously taught his disciples how to pray. Our Father who are in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your
Yeah.
kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the glory and the power, the glory, and the kingdom forever. Okay, so
Amen.
then there's other places about prayer, but a lot of times we treat prayer as as someone who is wanting to be served or waited on. So we treat God like this cosmic butler or this maid or this waiter,
Mm.
where, hey, we need this. Hey, we need this. Hey, I'm thirsty. Can you give me this? And it's kind of like, well, God's not this genie in the bottle, this cosmic waiter or maid or butler
Mhm,
that you can just
mhm,
call on for whatever you want. Like, that's not what prayer is for. And
mhm,
that's one of the things that I love about John Piper and him teaching about prayer, and he shares that prayer is like this wartime walkie-talkie where you get to communicate to the commander in chief what you need on the ground to accomplish the mission that he
mhm,
has sent you on. And that's what it's really about. And
mm,
that's kind of where when you look at emotions, all right, so we know that our mission, that the mission that God is on is to redeem a people for himself, to glorify him in all spheres of life. Okay, like that's his mission, to
mm.
redeem a people from all peoples, every tribe, nation, tongue, and people group,
Yeah.
to reflect his glory in all spheres of life. And so therefore now prayer is like, God, I'm asking you to intervene. I'm asking you to help
Mm,
so that I can be emotionally healthy. I'm asking that you help so that I'm angry but I don't sin. I'm asking, this
mm.
is how it applies emotionally, right?
Yeah, yeah,
As opposed to like God, and I don't know, so we a lot of
yeah, yeah,
times,
yeah,
like, are just asking God to do something for us rather than asking him to intervene so that we can actually accomplish what he wants us to here on planet Earth.
yeah,
So that's just what I mean by that. And
yeah. It's helpful.
um, and
I
again, that's where if you think about these spiritual disciplines, the way, like, there is a right way to lift weights and there is a wrong way to lift weights. And
Yeah,
if you lift weights in the wrong way, it can actually hurt you. And if you lift weights in the wrong way, it might not even build any kind of muscle. You might just be doing it for the sake of doing it. And I think a
yeah,
lot of times spiritual disciplines,
mm,
because sometimes we don't even explain them to the degree that they need to be explained. Just like a
yeah,
trainer would have to explain to us, hey, there's a right way to run, there's a right way to
mhm,
swim, there's a right way to bike, there's a right way to lift weights. And if you
mm,
do it the wrong way, you actually do get hurt.
mm.
And so, when I feel like a lot of times, if we're not careful, we can tell people as church leaders to do all of these things and not tell them the correct way. And as a result, they get hurt. Like, I'll give you a for instance about how somebody could get hurt praying. If they pray wrongly and God doesn't show up and answer their prayer, guess what happens? They lose confidence in God.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
I can be lifting weights and doing it
yeah,
wrong, and I'm not
yeah,
getting my muscles aren't growing, and then guess what? I lose confidence in the weights. Well,
yeah.
no, it was never the weights. You're doing it wrong. And,
Mm.
and I think that happens in spiritual, kind of discipline. So that's what I meant by,
That's great.
there's a right way to pray and there's a wrong way to pray.
That's great. That then leads us to you asked this question: how do I understand emotional intelligence? And you You showed us this book by Daniel Coleman, and you gave us a crash course for understanding emotional intelligence. Before we get there, you gave us a sanctified definition based on his definition. I love this because you said the world will never push us in the direction God wants. They will push us to have us or self being in the center. It's just that makes so much sense understanding it through the faith framework, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
and this is what and this is really what I'm trying to model for us. We don't just, it's not like the church just rejects the world straight up. Like
right,
I would say that Daniel Goleman, what he has done is actually helped us as human beings
it's good
to
stuff.
understand emotions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what Daniel Goleman doesn't do, just as Inside Out doesn't do, they don't put it through the faith framework. They don't put it through
Yeah.
a Christian biblical worldview. And so what I like to do is I like to take the good of the world, that there is common grace. So there is a teaching
Mm,
that many theologians have called common grace and special grace. Special grace would be the revelation of Jesus as King and Savior, and then that special revelation is redemption.
mm,
And then the special revelation coming and really understanding the word. Because I would say this, a lost person, they could read the Bible, but unless the Spirit of God gives them insight and understanding to that word, they do not fully understand it the way it was meant to be understood. That's
mm,
special revelation. But then there's common grace, and common grace is based upon the idea where God allows it to rain on the just and the unjust for crops to grow.
mm,
Well, so both the saved and the lost person, they both experience God's common grace. And so when you take Daniel Goleman or you take Inside Out, I think Inside Out is a good example of common grace.
mm.
It's this just awareness of emotions, and that, hey, these emotions are real, and it's
Mm.
important for you to understand them. And then Daniel Goleman and his work of emotional intelligence, hey, it's important for you to understand your emotions.
Yeah,
And these are four, and this is a framework, but these are four areas of emotional health or emotional intelligence. And so I love the common grace. And so what I like to do is take the common grace and not throw it out because it was done by an unbeliever, but go, all right, how
sure.
do we sanctify this? How do we put this up against the scriptures
Yeah,
from a biblical worldview, and then
yeah,
actually apply it to us? That's what I love to model,
yeah.
for people, and hopefully it came out here.
I love it. Yeah. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Is that from Daniel Goleman?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Now,
then,
now I broke it down though. So I took concepts that he has in
yeah.
terms of, but I broke it down in my own preacher way, right?
Okay, I thought so. So like under
Yeah,
self-awareness, run
yeah,
diagnostics, that's where you broke it down. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But when I started seeing acrostics, I was like, yeah, that's
yeah.
Pastor Josh.
That ain't Daniel. I mean,
I heard from two different people that they're like, we want pictures of this, we want to use this in our business, in our work. Like this is so practical and relevant.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got a lot of that. And, sometimes I think the more people sit under my teaching in the summer, like the more they go, it is biblical, but it's so practical. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And that's part of what like I was telling somebody this weekend is that I do feel like there are a lot of preachers, and I can do this. I mean, you know that. I mean, I that are highly inspirational, and they'll give
Mm,
you truth that's inspiring, and some of this makes you want to go out and conquer the world, and that's great because again, I know how to do that. But what my heart ultimately is that, yes, while I want to inspire.
mm.
And I could do that every single weekend because I just know how to do it. But I want to inform to the degree where you understand how God can bring transformation. And so
Huh.
I'm informing
Yeah,
your
yeah.
emotions. But not only am I informing you, but I'm hoping that through the power of the Spirit is that now you not only are you informed, but you've actually been given the application to actually apply it to your own life, to actually see God bring about transformation in your life, and in this
Yeah.
particular instance,
Yeah.
through emotions. And then and last month was through how you view technology.
Mhm.
Like I did have somebody, she's like, this is awesome. Someone relatively new to Northland. I think they started at the Faith and Technology. She said that first week, um, she said, I'm like, how's this like even gonna like, if I, she said it this way. She said, if I wanted to be educated, I would go back to school. But then she said, hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm like, and she said, but I went home and all I could do was think about it, how I applied to my life.
Yeah.
And like I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome! Like, what a
Right.
great encouragement is that? Because it is, and I feel like is that where is that kind of where the church is failing? Is that we are inspiring, but we're not educating.
Ooh,
Um,
yeah.
and so
Gosh, that's so wise.
can we do both? Can we inspire and
Right.
educate? You know,
Right. Oh, he's just teaching us again. Oh man, I just want some pithy comments that I can feel good about myself and check off the box.
yeah.
Oh man,
So
yeah.
that's what I
I'm
love.
so glad she shared that because that's so
Oh yeah.
real and raw.
Yeah, and I love it
Um,
because
yeah,
again, my heart is like I do want to educate.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I am a teacher at heart, but
Yeah,
but I'll just be honest, like it's so hard because I know that is not the culture of the church, and in
yep.
some sense, that's not necessarily what has grown churches.
It's not.
But and again, like I mean, like I would give you. So when we were in Africa, and I preached that sermon, about if you make it through the temptation, I think what my main point was, if you make it through temptation, you will make Jesus famous among the nations. That was
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's inspiring. And then to go through it, I mean, like, yes, I could preach that, kind of every
Hmm.
week. And so, or that kind of message every week. But I'm like, okay, well, and while that would, again, that would be inspiring and people could, take that and go, yes, let's make Jesus famous among the nations. Okay, but if you're going to make him famous among the nations, you also need to be an emotionally healthy Christian. So,
Yeah.
you need to understand faith and technology. You need to, so
Hmm.
those are, yeah. So that's
Wow.
what my heart is to educate for the
Yeah, yeah.
whole of the Christian life. So
Oh man,
yeah.
I love that. Well, and that takes us to you had so many different so much meat under this, the four, the crash course. I would recommend all of us. I mean, I took so many notes. Recommend us to go back and watch it. I want to get to the practical example you gave about Rwanda and Uganda. Um, that was masterful. Certainly towards the end of the towards the end of the trip, you started thinking there might be something here because I've been feeling all of these emotions. So how did?
I wish I would have thought about that at the very beginning, so I would have taken more pictures. You know me, I don't take a lot of I
No,
don't take a
yeah,
lot. I'll let you take the pictures
and you
and
take videos, yeah,
well, yeah, and so but yeah, and there's a reason why I don't like. I mean, again, there's a reason why. Like for me, I don't take a lot of pictures,
yeah,
but I'm like, man,
yeah.
I wish I would have taken a lot.
Mm,
I wish I would have taken more because I could have captured so many more emotions.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in terms of moments where I'm like, I'm feeling this, and so I thought that was a good way to be able to share, about our trip, to celebrate with Northland all of the ways
Mm,
that they have been used to bring joy. So
yeah. Yeah, I appreciate how real and honest you were. There was several real life examples for all of them. For anger, I had to relive that PTSD a little bit, and then the sadness. You can't even put into words the genocide memorial.
yeah,
It's hard to put into words that one bedroom house. There's several of them we went into. Um,
yeah.
it's hard.
Well, and so let's go a little bit deeper, into that because I couldn't. All right, all right, so like just take anger, okay?
Yeah.
So now that's me processing it. So I just want to remind people, like
Yeah.
now I was processing it with safe people. So
Yeah.
here's the thing: your anger, like, because I feel like while I was frustrated, irritated, and angry, I don't
Yeah.
ever felt like I crossed the line of sin. Now, what
Mm,
is sin again? It's the unraveling of love for God. And
mm,
what I would also say is the
yeah.
unraveling of love for another, right? Okay, so if
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I sin against God,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the way that I would sin against another is the unraveling of love. So I'll
Yeah.
give you
Yeah. Yeah.
an example. So in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus, he's in the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you, anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." Okay, so what is that? That anger is an unraveling of love for another, to the point that you hate them, to the point that you want them to die or you want to hurt them in some way. It's like the age-old sin of Cain against
Mm,
Abel. He
yeah.
hated
Yeah. Yeah.
his brother because of
Yeah.
what his brother made him feel. So
Sure.
that's what I would say. Like, just make sure, like, when you're angry, the Bible says, "Be angry and do not sin." And that the idea of sin is the unraveling of love for God, where you wouldn't trust Him, where you would disobey Him,
Mm,
and then the unraveling of love for your neighbor or someone else is this hatred, this animosity. So
yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
perfectly okay to
Yeah.
express frustration
Yeah.
with another,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
were doing with that guy who was on the customer service call. We're like, bro, like, like I don't know what to tell you, because I was getting a little frustrated with him because he's not listening, and
Yeah.
so, but I never felt like I crossed the line.
No.
I
Yeah.
want,
There.
like, I listen. I wanted to give more, but I'm like, I'm trying to restrain
Yeah.
and have this kind of controlled frustration, right? So
Yeah. I think
that's
that's
an
a great
example of,
example.
of anger,
That's
right?
a great example. Yeah. So all of us were frustrated, certainly, and angry. None of us, there wasn't yelling, right? There wasn't cussing, there wasn't, anything to the point where we had to like go back to the other person and repair the relationship. I think that would be kind of a, hey, if it was something that I just flew off the handle at you, and then I was just like eaten up inside. The next morning I have to, hey, I apologize for saying that to you. There, we didn't get to that point, and it was actually, no, it's not pleasant to experience that with each other, but it was interesting for me to experience how anger can be evident without sinning.
Yeah.
Does that
Well,
make sense?
yeah. Well, and so when again, anger is one of those emotions that there is going to there is going to maybe be some discomfort. I mean, I could imagine with Jesus, turning over the tables, or God's wrath, or God's
Mm,
fire and indignation.
yeah,
You think that was pleasant? No,
yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't pleasant.
Mm,
But that's where I think that Zen Christian comes in, where everything ought to be pleasant and calm
yeah,
and
yeah,
peaceful. But here's one of the things that I would say. A lot of times we don't even understand peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Because a lot of times we're like, we want peace at all cost. Okay, well, so when you in some sense strive for peace, and now you can't even confront injustice, or you can't even confront
mhm,
something that is not healthy, you have
mm,
no longer true peace. Because
mhm,
true peace, according to God, is shalom. It's total flourishing. So if there's no total flourishing, and you're letting unhealth happen, or you're letting people just act however they want to just for the sake of keeping peace, that's not peace. So,
mm,
but so this idea of irritation or anger or frustration, I think, and here's the reason why you'll have anger. Again, didn't have time to unpack this, but anger is really caused when something that should be isn't. So that's why
yeah,
a lot of these emotions, sadness, anger, and disgust, they kind of triangulate,
mm,
and they can either go together or they can be, but when you have anger, is that you were expecting something and you didn't get it. So we were expecting our bags, we didn't get it. Where's
mm,
our bag? Well, it's on its way. Where is our bag?
Yeah.
Well, and so it's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
like, well, I didn't get it when I thought I should have got it, and yeah. So,
Mm,
but then how? Like that's why you would get mad at whether it's God or someone else, is that you expected them to do this and they didn't,
mm,
and so you expected life to go this way and it didn't. That's why a lot of times anger is, from a human perspective, is connected to pain and suffering. We don't want to experience pain and suffering or
yeah.
disappointment or discouragement, and so therefore we're angry.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like it's okay to be angry. You just don't sin. So that's where that kind of moves you, but you don't want it to move you to resentment, bitterness,
Sure.
unforgiveness,
Yeah.
right? Because that's
Yeah.
moving you away from the Lord versus to trust the Lord, in resolving that anger.
Yeah.
Now sadness and grief and lament, like let's take the genocide, is very heavy learning about that. So how do we let that kind of sadness move us in the direction of God? Well, in that case, it could be in educating people, how to get along, and the love that we ought to have for every single kind of person, regardless of ethnicity or kind of demographic.
Mm,
Extreme poverty, that sadness, lament, and grief should move you. How do we create? Is there any way, instead of just like in some sense giving them a handout, is there any way that we can create economic vitality in that area? And that's actually something that we want to work with Pastor Robert and Rose about, is how do
mm,
we allow the church to create some kind of economic vitality in that community, right?
yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
way that we're letting this emotion that really is heavy, that's
Mm,
sad, that's lament, that's grief, and that instead of just experiencing it, how do we let that move us in the direction of God to actually do something about it?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So then we had discussed in fear. So for fear, you said you're slightly a germaphobe.
slightly.
What would Joni say about that?
I mean, slight to mild, maybe.
I would
Slight.
say it's a little more severe than that.
Yeah, might be.
I think at the nine you said I'm neurophobia, and I looked at Kaylee. I'm like neurophobia. Oh, but I loved how, man, the way you ended it with joy
Yeah,
was so great. Obviously the examples you gave, a wonderful way to give an update and a wonderful way to thank the congregation. But then just the way you wrap that up of like the reason you ended with joy was, it being a core emotion. And then when you got to experience what God did, in and through us and in and through Northland and the generosity, you didn't care about X, Y, and Z, right? And so that's just an interesting thing how the joy and being used by God to be moved in his direction can really put things into perspective and help to not erase all of those emotions, but
yeah,
put those emotions under the lordship of God and put them in perspective. So when we look back on the trip, right, we can look back on the trip and remember all of those emotions, but they don't have to. The anger, the sadness doesn't have to
yeah,
overshadow and
yeah.
overwhelm.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why that image, in terms of looking at fear and joy as the core emotions, the fear of the Lord, the reverent fear of God, the
Mm,
awestruck fear of God, and the joy
mm,
is key. Because again, it's not that you shouldn't have any of those other emotions. And again, that's where I really wanted people to know that, like, I have those, and I have them in 2 weeks, every single day of those 2 weeks. But when you put it in context, when you put our days in context,
mm,
put our life in context, if we live for the glory of God, we
mm,
will always come back to joy. we will always come back to a healthy, reverent fear of God. And it won't allow those emotions, those secondary sin producing emotions, to actually become the core emotion. See, that's what happens. That's what gets us off kilter, is when we allow joy to be replaced by anger. When we allow joy
Mm,
to be replaced by disgust, when we
yeah.
allow joy to be replaced by sadness, and that becomes the core emotion, then it truly does affect us because it takes it out of the context in which which it was designed to be. And I
Yeah.
think it's what, in some sense, to a degree, what Nehemiah is really getting at. The joy of the Lord will be your strength in the midst of hurt and heartache, in the midst of opposition, in the midst of
Mm,
fear, in the midst of disgust, in the midst of sadness with the walls being
mm,
torn down, in the midst of, in some sense, anger at why, why it even happened. There's the joy that, hey, this is what God has called us to. This is what God is doing in and through us, and something miraculous is happening.
yeah.
And so the joy, and so yeah, so that's where I feel like it was really a good way to end, and hopefully I hadn't lost people by then, in terms of but I felt like it moved on along, because it wasn't a normal framework of a sermon. It was
Mm-mm.
really trying to take them on a journey of emotions, but then
Yeah.
really ending with stories
Yeah.
about how I embodied all of those emotions, but that core emotion, joy,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
made the trip so worth it.
Mm.
Because I mean, I told you on the last day when we were traveling home, I'm done. Like, stick a fork. I don't want to be around anybody. I'm teetering on a, especially when they wanted to take my carry-on bag and they wanted to check it. I'm like, don't you put your mutts on my bag. I need my bag. Like, Brussels Airlines, you've already touched my bag once and you lost it. Oh,
You were
you
you were
saw me.
teetering. You were
Yeah, I
teetering.
was teetering. I mean, you saw. I mean, like, and again, this is part of where, like, one of the reasons why I share what I do is I want people to know I want to be a safe person for you.
Mm,
Now, again, I don't vomit everything. But that's why you and Gus know that there's only a certain amount of people that I could really travel with. Because when you travel with someone the way we travel together, you're basically living with them.
yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you live with me for 2 weeks, I promise you, you're going to see a little bit of humanity.
Hmm.
And a lot of times people want to put pastors on pedestals, and they want to think pastors don't have emotions, or,
Hmm.
don't struggle with processing things, or,
Hmm.
like in the morning, like, don't talk to me, you know, like it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I haven't had my coffee. I've had 6 hours of sleep for 5 days in a row. I'm not there yet. So,
This is great. I don't want to talk, so I'm good.
and it's okay. And here's the thing, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but no, I'm grateful for what God did. Obviously, God's doing a work in Africa. There's a
Yeah.
lot for us to do in and through our partners there,
Yeah.
because they really do want the training that
Yeah.
that we have. I mean, they want the theological training,
Yeah.
and then they want even the practical training on how do you engage your community holistically as
Yeah.
a church, as a kind of a non-government organization, or in our case, a
Yeah.
nonprofit, and then leveraging your property for business in the marketplace, and really blessing the community holistically. Like,
Yeah.
they're hungry for that, and I'm grateful that we went and saw all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited for next steps. Maybe developing a faithful presence certificate program and what that'll look like, both over there and over here.
Yeah.
So for next steps, what you gave us was you encouraged us to go take an EQ test, a free one online. You also gave us a couple of resources, the anger workbook, emotionally healthy spirituality, and untangle your emotions. And then you gave us the affirmation, the idea, the spurring on to go seek counseling if we need it. And you gave us the counseling email at Northland.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on those
Yeah.
next steps?
Yeah, well, it's funny, I wish I would have, well, I mean, I didn't have time, but show you my scores, my EQ scores. I mean, yeah,
Uh,
and I think I alluded to this, but
yeah.
my self-awareness is like a 9. I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
because it's
Uh-huh.
only well, the one I took was a 1 to 10.
Okay.
10 being awesome, and one being
Sure.
you really got to work on that. So my self-awareness is like a 9. My
Okay.
self-management is like an 8. My
Okay.
social awareness is like a 7. My relationship management is like a 4. And so this is kind of where I joke around and go, man, I'm very socially aware. I can tell you what you're feeling. I can see where you're at. I just don't care. So,
Yeah.
but because there's a lot to when I say managing a relationship, because
Sure.
relationships are messy, relationships are complex,
Mm.
relationships are time consuming.
Yeah.
And I think that shows, and in all honesty, I actually think it shows a little bit of selfishness in my own life, is that
Mm.
while I can note where you might be, and I can in some sense engage you well to kind of figure out where you might be,
Mm.
I don't go that next step to actually serve you
Mm.
and actually serving and meeting your emotional needs.
Mm.
And so that's where I need to grow on, kind of grow in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because part of that, I mean, it really is part of that is diffusing conflict,
Yeah.
kind of managing conflict well,
Yeah.
uh, as opposed to, kind of igniting it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's ways to now again, there's sometimes where conflict's inevitable and you got to hit it head on. And this is where discernment comes in. A lot of
Mm.
times in relationship management, you don't need to incite conflict. You need to diffuse it because at the end of the day, it's not that important. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but there are
Mm.
some things that, I mean, obviously, like with Paul and Barnabas and John Mark, it was very important what Paul wanted, and then it was very important to Barnabas what he wanted, and you see the conflict.
Mm.
So there was no, in some sense, diffusing that conflict. So there's sometimes conflict is inevitable, and you need to lean into the discomfort. But a lot of times, and that's where I had to learn. Like, did I really need to be right in
Yeah.
that conversation? Like, did it affect anything? Did it really move the needle? Or did I
Mm.
just really want to show how smart I was? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so those are things that
Mm.
really do go into that relationship management. And here's what I would say too. You just, as I'm thinking through all of this, the things that I've learned, the more mature you are, and the higher, when I say the higher you are in an organization,
Mm-hmm.
the more you have to be okay with conflict,
Yeah.
because that's where decisions are being made. So
Mm.
wherever decisions are being made, that's where direction is being direct. That's where direction is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you do need to be able, but you also need to be able to have really good, and this is where I'm still working on this, right? Still need to have really good skills, emotional skills to navigate the complexity of sometimes conflict.
Mm.
But usually mirroring. So let me just say what I'm hearing,
Mm-hmm.
and then asking questions, and sometimes I just don't do a good job at that because I'm trying to get somewhere quick. And
Sure.
sometimes in conflict, you might not be
Mm.
able to get anywhere quickly. And so you
Mm.
might need to, again, pause and yeah. So those are all of the ways that I'm trying to grow my own EQ. And so that's
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
if you take a test,
Yeah.
at least shows you where you are on the
Sure.
scale.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, don't be afraid of counseling. I mean, you can have a good, healthy fear of counseling, like, no, I'm afraid to actually learn who I really am or why. Yeah, like that's okay. Uh,
Mm.
go ahead and learn about your deficiencies. Because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what you did.
Absolutely. Great. This was a wonderful week. A lot to it, very deep, very practical. I'm sure next week's going to be similar.
Yeah, I have to see how I'm gonna, yeah, gosh, there's just I have like I don't know 10 pages of notes, and I'm like, oh gosh, how do I tailor that one down,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was just going to focus on anxiety, but I do want to focus on the others,
Okay.
so yeah, we'll see, but we'll see what God does during this week at the beach. Maybe I'll have a revelation, and it gives it to me. So. Well, cool, man. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Northland family and friends, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Extra Takes. Here's what I would really, really encourage you to do, though. Please, please, like and share this. Because the more people, definitely the more Northlanders and those who are following us, we're having even more and more people follow us on social media and YouTube. And so what we want to do is make sure that they're actually watching or listening to this supplemental teaching on hopefully what is not only just educational but transformational. That's what the gospel is. The gospel is transformational in our life. And so we don't do these for fun. I mean, I'm sure that Matt does have fun, and I definitely have fun, but we really do it for your edification. And so if you like it and share it, that would be amazing. So we love you. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Extra Takes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you won't miss a single episode.